Hi beautiful, welcome to my channel. Today's video is very exciting because we are going to be playing a game of marry, kiss, or kick. This video idea, totally not mine. I am stealing it from Amanda from Makeup Just for Fun and Samantha Marsh. I believe the original creator is Amanda from Makeup Just for Fun. She and Samantha Marsh did a collaboration a few days ago and I watched both their videos and it's the most fun I've had watching a beauty video in a while. It was just refreshing and funny, and so I basically just feel like this should be a tag video and we should all kind of just make our own versions of it, because I watched Amanda's video and Samantha's video and they both have very different answers. The reasons for the palette pickings was very different as well, and as I was watching their videos I was kind of imagining my own answers and mine are also different. So I feel like we all have kind of our own take on this palette game, and it totally should be a tag type video where a lot of people recreate it. I don't know, I wanted to recreate it, so here we are. I'm super pumped. I'm going to scoot over this way, and right here you guys will see the palettes that are competing against each other. So huge props to Amanda from Makeup Just for Fun for creating this video, and I'm super pumped to give my answers, so let's go ahead and get started. The way the game works is I'm going to have a selection of palettes right here next to me, and I have to marry one, kiss one, and kick one, and of course I'll be giving you the reasonings as to why. So the first category is OG Beauty YouTube palette, and we have the Urban Decay Naked palette, we have the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette, and we have the Tarte Tartelette palettes. I think for this one I'm going to start with the kick. The one that I would kick is actually the Anastasia Modern Renaissance palette. The only reason that palette is still in my collection is because it completes it. I don't want to like give away or throw away any of my Anastasia palettes. I can always reference it for palette swatch comparisons when a palette comes out and all of that. But for some reason, don't ask me why, I honestly like fully stopped liking that palette at all. And it's weird because when it first came out I was all about that palette. I loved it. I remember I didn't have a YouTube channel back then, but I would post about it on my Instagram and I was so excited for it. And I feel like as time went by I can now look back at that palette in my collection and it doesn't bring me any type of joy for some reason. Like I just don't like the color story. I don't know what happened. I think of it and all I can think about is it being very powdery. And I've had a lot of people throughout the years ask me to do a 5 looks 1 palette with that one, because I've gone back and done 5 looks 1 palettes with a lot of the older palettes in my collection, and you're hearing it here first. I'm never going to do a 5 looks 1 palette on that one because I just don't like it anymore. It doesn't inspire me. So that one is getting the boots. Now the one that I would kiss, because him and I definitely had a romance, we had a fling if you will, is the Tarte Tartelette palette. I don't look back at that palette and think that I hate it. I don't think that it has bad quality. I don't think anything wrong of it, but it doesn't really attract me that much anymore. So he had its place and time. I like the formula. I remember that I would reach for those mattes a lot and combine those mattes with like shimmers from other palettes and whatnot. So that is a palette that I did definitely like for a period of time, and it's not a favorite of mine anymore. I actually think I might have given it away. I don't think it's part of my collection anymore. But with that said, if I had to use it tomorrow, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I would be okay with the idea of using it again. And so of course that leaves the Urban Decay Original Naked palette as the palette that I would totally marry. I've had my Urban Decay Original Naked palette for ever. It's definitely been like 10 years for sure since I've had it. And I haven't used it in quite a few years, but I sometimes open it and look at it and swatch the shades just to remind myself of how good Urban Decay formulas used to be, because they're definitely not that beautiful, creamy, smooth, and pigmented anymore, okay? That palette, even though it has to be expired, right? Because it's been 10 years. So I don't put it on my eyes anymore as a precaution. But even though it's been 10 years, it still feels creamy. It still swatches super pigmented, and it's a color story that for me is timeless. So, you know, out of these three palettes, I definitely feel like the Urban Decay Naked palette is the one that is trustworthy, the one that I can count on forever, and so that is the palette that I'm marrying. The next category is Huda Beauty palettes, and we have the Empowered palette by Huda Beauty that just came out this year. We have the Rose Quartz palette, which was last year's palette, I believe. Or was it the year before? I don't remember, but it is a really nice palette. And then we have the Mercury Retrograde palette from Huda Beauty, which if you've watched my channel before, I love. I'm going to start with Kick again. The palette that I would kick from these three at this moment in time, I'm not really sure about it, but this is just how I'm feeling today. I would kick the Rose Quartz palette. I know, I'm shocked as well. And it is such a beautiful palette. I absolutely love that one. It's amazing, I know. But I don't reach for it that often. I couldn't pinpoint the reason why, because it has absolutely stunning shades. But when I think of this palette, I think of really sparkly shimmer shades that I love. And then eye looks that don't have a lot of depth to them. So maybe that is the reason why it doesn't have enough depth that I want to reach for it all the time. However, it is a palette that I love anyways, but I mean, I have to pick one, right? So I would sadly, very sadly, kick the Rose Quartz palette from Huda Beauty. The one that I would kiss is one that I'm having a fling with at the moment, and that is the Empowered palette by Huda Beauty. He is dark, he is mysterious and handsome, he is sexy, okay? I absolutely love the Empowered palette by Huda Beauty. When I first reviewed it, I talked about how a lot of the shades were kind of similar to one another, which they kind of are, okay? But what it comes down to is I get looks that I am obsessed with every time I use that palette. Every time I use that palette, I love the look that I create. It's richly pigmented, it blends like a dream. It has really stunning sparkly shades in there. I love it. It's really, really nice. So that is the palette that I would kiss. I don't know that that would be the one that I would marry, because maybe we're just having a moment, you know? Maybe it's because it's new and I'm hyped up about it, and maybe something else will come along that will diminish how I feel about this one. I'm honestly not sure yet, time will tell. But the one that I've loved the longest, the one that I would marry from these three, is definitely the Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde palette. He is fun and lighthearted, and I have a good time with him every time I use it, okay? Plus, it is the palette that I've had the longest out of these three, and whenever I do my rankings video every year, that one is still usually the one that comes out on top. That is my number one Huda Beauty palette. I love the looks that I can create with that one. It's so fun. It's such a beautiful, springy, summery palette. It's one of these palettes that has stood the test of time in my collection because it is still regarded as one of my all-time favorites, and especially my all-time favorite from Huda. So I would marry Mercury Retrograde and kiss the Empowered palettes. The next category is universally hated palettes slash palettes that got really bad reviews. So the first palette is from Colourpop, and it is the Colourpop Candyland palette. The second palette is the Subculture palette from Anastasia, and at the bottom we have all three palettes from the Huda Beauty Pastel collection. This one's, I think, a little easy for me. I would definitely kick the Huda Beauty Pastel palettes. I reviewed the Huda Beauty Pastel palettes on my channel years ago when it came out, and even though I usually keep the palettes that I review in order to make like end of the year videos, swatch comparisons with, I keep them because I know that for the purposes of my YouTube channel, I'm going to most likely use them again or feature them again in a future video. Now, with that said, I was so upset about the quality of the Huda Beauty Pastel palettes that I took them back. I returned them just to make a point about like how horrible they were. And there's very few things in my makeup collection that I do that with, but when something really upsets me, like when I feel robbed, I make it a point to take it back, because it is just not fair that like brands think that they can get away with like such shitty quality. So I would definitely kick the Huda Beauty pastel palettes immediately right now. I cannot stand how bad those palettes were. They were patchy, they didn't have pigment, they would blend away. It was really a shit show, okay? It was so bad. So definitely kicking those. And so that would leave me to kiss the Candyland palette from Colourpop, because I have never tried it. And so because I have never tried it, now I know that it has bad reviews, so I don't know if I would marry it because it has bad reviews. But I think I would totally give it a chance, because regardless of the bad reviews that I now know it has, it's a good looking palette, you know? So I would kiss the Colourpop Candyland palette, and then I would marry the Anastasia Subculture palette for lack of a better option. That palette I know I can create really stunning looks with if I work on a relationship a lot. You know, like I really have to work on making that palette blend the way that I want it to blend, but eventually I can get a very beautiful look with it. I have that palette in my collection, and it is one that I'm not getting rid of, because there are shades in that palette that are really spectacular, that are really beautiful, and that are good. It's just the palette as a whole we have trouble with. There are just other shades in there that are kind of on the crazy side, very powdery, very patchy. They can be on the eye, and if you like blend it a little bit, it goes away. They're a little finicky. However, because I know that if I, you know, go back a few times and add and subtract and whatever, I can get a look that I want with it. And because I really love the color story, I think the Subculture palette from Anastasia is the one that I would be marrying. The next category is universally loved mauve palettes, and these are our contestants right here. First we have the Natasha Denona Retro palette, then we have the Sigma New Mod palette, which looks stunning, and third we have the Pat McGrath Mothership No. 7 palette. I think once again I'm going to start by the one I'm kicking, because for me this one's easy. I would kick, and I know this is about to sound crazy, I know, but I would kick the Natasha Denona Retro palette. For some reason, that palette is just a little bit too cool toned for me. I have never fallen in love with that color story of that palette. If it was just a little bit more neutral leaning, I think I would get the hype a bit more, but the colors are just a little bit too cool toned for me. I did a couple of videos with that one when it first came out. I reviewed it. I did a 5 looks 1 palette with it, and I enjoyed playing with it, but it's not a color story that attracts me enough to want to go back to it all the time, which is crazy because rose mauve colors are one of my favorite color stories to wear on my eyes. So it totally sounds crazy to me that I wouldn't like that palette, because I know that those are kind of color stories that I gravitate towards a lot. But the undertones of that Natasha Denona palette, I'm just not in love with. I feel like my skin tone and those undertones just don't go well together for some reason. So yeah, that is the one that I would kick, because I feel like it just kind of makes me look a little dead. Obviously, if you've watched my channel before, you know that I would marry time and time again the Pat McGrath Mothership 7 palette. That is not only a beautiful palette that I love to reach for, but it's also one of my favorite Pat McGrath palettes in my whole collection. I rank my Pat McGrath palettes every once in a while, and that one usually comes out first or second. I love that palette so much. It has the most beautiful, intense, sparkly shimmer shades. The mauve pinky shades in that palette are incredibly beautiful and rich and pigmented, and they blend like an absolute dream. They combine with each other, just crazy pretty. The 5 looks 1 palette video I created with that palette specifically is one of my favorites I've done here on my YouTube channel, period. I love it, and it is a color story that, like I said, I do love to reach for. I do love to wear on my eyes a lot. It's pretty, it's romantic, it's soft, it has a little bit of added color to it. What is not to love? I would 100% marry the Pat McGrath Mothership number 7 palette. It is one of my favorites. And so that leaves me with the Sigma New Mud palette to be the one I kiss. That palette looks incredibly beautiful, and unfortunately I have not tried it yet. I was about to lie to you and tell you that I don't have it, but Sigma actually sent it to me a few months ago and I just never got to trying it. So I need to get it together and finally try this palette. You guys have been telling me this palette is amazing, and I feel like now that I see it in this video, this is my wake-up call to finally try the New Mud palette from Sigma Beauty. So that one is the one that I would definitely kiss. Super good looking, right up my alley. I definitely want to try it out. Can't wait to play with it now that it's kind of been brought up to the surface of my brain. It really looks stunning. It totally looks like a color story that I would 100% go for. The next category is the OG warm toned palettes, and here is our selection. At the top we have the Tartelette Toasted palette, in the middle Anastasia Soft Glam, and at the bottom we have the Colourpop Yes Please palette, which I learned when I was watching Amanda's videos that that was the first Colourpop like palette that was ever released. I had no idea. It looks beautiful. And so for this one, I'm actually not going to start by the one I'm going to kick. I'm going to start by the one I'm marrying, and I am marrying the Anastasia Soft Glam palette. That palette is just so fantastic and so reliable. It has an amazing color story that you can literally use for any occasion. You can create really soft, glam, everyday looks with that one. You can create work appropriate looks with it, or you can spice things up with the darker mattes and the shimmer shades that the palette has in it to create some really fun nighttime glamorous looks as well. That palette has an absolutely incredible color story. It is so reliable. I've had it in my collection for years, and it is a palette that every so often I go back to. It's definitely highly regarded for me. So the Anastasia Soft Glam palette is definitely the palette that I would be marrying from these. And then I think the one that I would kiss, this is difficult because I have tried the Tartelette Toasted palette and it's okay. I like it okay. It's just like not my favorite thing in the whole wide world. And then the Colourpop one looks absolutely stunning. It has a very fun, very warm color story, but I've never seen it in person. So I think I would actually kiss the Colourpop one because that color story just looks a bit more fun and appealing to me at the moment. Plus it looks like it has a really nice fun bright yellow in there. I feel like I would actually love that Colourpop palette. It looks like a lot of fun, and it looks like a palette that you can actually adapt to different seasons throughout the year. It's fun. I like it. So I think I would kiss the Colourpop palette. It seems like a fun palette to have. And so then I would kick the Tartelette one. Nothing against it. Maybe I would have thought of this differently a few years ago, but I feel like we have so many palettes that kind of have that same exact color story as the Tartelette palette nowadays that that one just seems like one that I could do without, so I'm gonna kick that one. Plus, actually, I don't know, I was never truly interested in it because I never bought it, you know, even when it came out. So kicking the Tartelette palette and not feeling guilty about it. This next category is the Colourpop Mega Palettes. And so we have the Bare Necessities palette, Stone Cold Fox palette, and It's a Mood palette. I'm about to give you my answers, but know that I actually have not tried any of these at all. So please take my answers as someone who is judging these palettes strictly by looking at the color stories and nothing else, because I've never tried the formulas, so I don't know if one is better than the other, you know? Anyways, I think the one that I would marry is the It's a Mood palette, because out of this trio of palettes I have next to me right here, that is the one that is the most different, the one that looks a bit more fun. And Colourpop always does a really fantastic job at putting like neutral, natural looking shades in every palette they have. So even though It's a Mood has some really fun like jewel tone shades in it, it also has your basic everyday neutral and warm tone shadows in there, so you can really create any type of look that you want with this one. Plus it has teals in it and I love teals, so I think It's a Mood is definitely 100% the one that I would marry. The one that I would kiss I think would actually be the Stone Cold Fox palette, because I really love the look of those cool tones in there. They're not too like grayish looking, like they are, but they have a neutral in there as well with them that I think would actually make those shades look very flattering. Plus it's a different palette from the Bare Necessities. I feel like the Bare Necessities is a bit too basic, so I think that for that reason I would kiss the Stone Cold Fox palette, because I don't know, it looks a bit different, it looks a bit more fun, it looks glamorous and sexy as well, and it's unlike any palette that I currently have in my collection, whereas Bare Necessities looks like every other palette that I already have. So I would kick Bare Necessities. It looks like a beautiful palette, but I feel like I just wouldn't reach for it all that often. I would kiss Stone Cold Fox and I would marry It's a Mood. I actually was looking at it on the website when I was making the little images to put next to me, and it's on sale for $17, so since we're getting married, I think I should buy it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. And also, since I was talking about making these little pictures, if anyone wants to make this video and you don't want to spend time making these pictures, because I'm not really like friends with Samantha Marsh or Amanda, so I didn't want to bother them and I just made them again myself. But if any one of you want to make this video and you want to use my images, just message me on Instagram and I will be more than happy to send them your way. I will save you some time. Next category is holiday palettes, and we have the Too Faced Pumpkin Spice palette up there. We have the Rudolph palette by Colourpop, and then we also have the Merry Christmas palette by Odin's Eye. So I'll start with the one I am marrying because it's a sure thing. No question in my mind about it. I would totally 100% marry the Odin's Eye Merry Christmas palette. That palette came out this year and just swept me off my feet. It has such a stunning color story and such an amazing quality. The shimmers, the duochrome shimmers in that palette are chef's kiss. Incredible. They're pigmented, you barely have to touch them. They have this intense shift to them. Just amazing. I love it. Plus it has really beautiful blendable colorful mattes, and it is the most Christmas palette of all of the Christmas palettes that have ever come out. The packaging, it looks like a Christmas card. Just stunning. Absolutely love it. So I would definitely marry the Odin's Eye Merry Christmas palette. The one that I would kick is definitely the Too Faced Pumpkin Spice palette, because he has way too many annoying brothers. All of them kind of look the same as well. All of them are basic, and at the end of the day, they don't even perform the way I want them to. So I would just not want to be part of that family at all. So the Pumpkin Spice palette is definitely getting a kick. By the way, I didn't remember that palette anymore, and when I looked at it again to look for the picture, the purple row at the bottom looks absolutely spectacular. If you have the Pumpkin Spice palette, let me know the tea down below. I'm definitely kicking it anyways, because like I said, Too Faced just has a lot of palettes that kind of look the same, and I'm just not in the mood for them. So that one is getting the boots. And so the one I would kiss is the Colourpop Rudolph palette. It's a Christmassy-ish palette, but at the same time it's kind of on the basic side, which I'm not upset about. It has a really nice amount of cool tone mattes and cool tone shimmers in there, plus just a pinch of like holiday cheer. So that seems like a really nice palette to have. So that would be the one that I would kiss. Plus also, I feel like at this point, Colourpop has a much more reliable formula than Too Faced does, and it's also more affordable. So kiss Colourpop, marry Odin's Eye, and kick Too Faced. I did go ahead and put a little twist on my video because their last category was Colourpop purple palettes. So 3 different Colourpop palettes that had a pretty much identical to each other color story and that I'd never tried before. And so because I wasn't going to know what I was talking about, I made me a last choice that was in accordance to my channel and my audience. I made a very random poll on my community page and I just asked you guys pick a Mothership palette, please and thank you. And you guys picked Mothership number 1, Mothership number 5, and Mothership number 10. So those are the palettes that I'm going to be deciding between, and this is truly torture because you guys know that I absolutely love every single one of these palettes for different reasons. Mothership number 10 has some of my most favorite Astro Blitz shades Pat has ever made. Mothership number 5 has my favorite burgundy matte shade that Pat McGrath has ever made. And Mothership number 1, well, that one is one of my all-time favorites. So that one is not that hard. I would definitely marry Mothership number 1. He is serious, he is reliable, he is a little bit colorful, and I absolutely love the performance of that palette. That is a palette that is a go-to for me. I always want to reach for the cool tone mattes in that palette. Those are very pigmented, extremely blendable. They perform like an absolute dream, and those shades literally go with like any shade you want to pair them with. Sometimes I reach for that specific palette just for the matte shades, because those matte shades you can literally use with anything. But then besides that, that palette also has these incredible Astro Blitz shades that are super sparkly and intense, and they have a really beautiful shift to them, really stunning duochromes. What is not to love? I fell in love with that palette when I first tried it. I did a 5 Lux 1 palette with it that to this day is one of my favorite 5 Lux 1 palettes I've ever done, and that palette actually made me fall in love with blue eyeshadow. So definitely marrying Mothership number 1. My issue is with the kissing and kicking part, because I would totally kiss both Mothership number 5 and Mothership number 10. This is so hard. I would take the Astro Blitz shades from Mothership number 10 and the matte shades from Mothership number 5, and that would be the palette to kiss, and then I would kick the rest of the shades. But I can't do that, right? I can't do that. Alright, this is a very tough decision. I'm over here sweating over this damn question, and I know this is a joke, but you guys know I take it seriously. So the one I would kiss, I think, right now would be Mothership number 10. Because I've just really been enjoying Mothership number 10 as of lately. I do not love every single color of that palette, and I do agree that sometimes if you create multiple looks with it, the looks kind of end up looking the same, but I love to reach for that palette to use in combination with other palettes in my collection, and I've been using it a lot like that lately, and I've been really loving using it like that lately. Plus it also has this really stunning neutral rich matte brown that pairs so beautifully with the rest of the colors in there. Mothership number 10 is an absolutely stunning palette, and like I said, I've been enjoying it a lot lately, so that is the one that I would kiss, which would make me sadly have to kick Mothership number 5. I'm definitely not as into like red tone looks as I used to, so that I think would be the main reason why I would be kicking that one instead, because I do really love the burgundy matte shade and the mid-tone brown matte shade that that palette has, and I also love the green shifts in the Astro Blitz shades too. But I have to pick one, right? So unfortunately, sadly, I would have to kick Mothership number 5. Things just cannot work between us today. I would kiss Mothership number 10 because him and I are having a fling at the moment, actually. And I'm definitely marrying Mothership number 1 because he is one reliable palette, okay? So that actually concludes my round of marry, kiss, or kick. As I said, I just had such a blast when I watched Samantha's video and Amanda's video that I had to make this video myself, and of course both of their videos are going to be listed and linked down below in the description box. You guys need to go watch them because they had very different answers from me and a very different kind of like perspective on the different palettes and the way they do their makeup and all of that. And you know, it's all fun and games, and I hope that you guys enjoyed my video as much as I enjoyed theirs. If you did like this one, don't forget to please give it a thumbs up before you leave. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please subscribe before you leave. I love you guys so much. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you back in the next video. Bye.